you could be in there all day, in the weeds, but then a waiter comes back and says, "Oh, table 16 said that's the best piece of fish they've ever eaten." You just go, "That's it. That's all you need." And it really is as simple as that.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Following in your father's footsteps is an old adage, but given the family-run nature of most hospitality business, it happens a lot in the restaurant sector. Of course, few have the added pressure to succeed as today's guest, whose father is one of the most loved food professionals on the planet. Jack Stein is the chef director of Stein Restaurants. Jack, how are you, mate?
Good, mate. Thanks a lot for having me on.
It's good to get you on the show. I mean, not only Rick Stein's son, but also Jill, who's a well-known restaurateur as well. What's it like following in the footsteps of that huge storm of influence?
Well, I mean, I suppose, it's an honor. I mean, we have 50 years. Our restaurant celebrates its 50th anniversary today. Not today, this year. So, I mean, that's kind of geological time for restaurants. 5 years is pretty good innings for a restaurant company. So yeah, we must be doing something right. And I guess it's I've just always been around it, and I think a lot of my friends who are having children or have got young children now, they're always asking me, like, how did your parents juggle it? How did they juggle the hard, like the long hours, the weekends, everything like that? And to be honest, we've always sort of just been in the restaurant, since I can remember. It's my earliest memory, eating oysters in France, and then the restaurant are my two earliest memories, and the fact that I like milk. It's a bit weird, but so it's kind of we kind of like, and also travel. Like the old man obviously does a lot of travel in his shows and stuff, as you guys have seen. And so we used to travel out to Australia every winter. So we'd close back in those days. The restaurant was closed in the winter before Dad got on TV. So we'd travel to Australia. Dad had a very close friend on the northern beaches in Sydney. And on the way, we'd stop off in Asia. And Dad was very kind of influenced by French cuisine to start with, as all chefs pretty much in Europe were at the time, in the 70s and the 80s. And then he started to discover, Thai food, Singapore, we went to Hong Kong, India, and suddenly he was just blown away. So we'd use a stop-off point, and they would kind of be doing research for the restaurant company. And then we'd go to Sydney for the winter, which was always great. Sort of mid to late 80s. So we're still doing all right in the cricket at the time. So that's kind of, and I think because of that, I see the hospitality industry and the idea of making people happy through food and drink and a nice atmosphere. I see that as just part of what we do as a family. It's sort of naturally, like, whether it's dinner around at Dad's, dinner around at Mum's, Christmas, whatever it might be, or just going to a restaurant. We're always talking about food and new things, influences. When, like, Dad obviously has a house in Sydney, so he's often in Australia and coming back with, because I think if you pound for pound, Australians are definitely the best home cooks in the world. And I think if you were to put a pin in a map of Australia, if you're taking out the bits with no one in, and just went to the nearest eating establishment, whether it's a motorway services or a restaurant, I think you'd eat better than anywhere else in the world, because I just think the standard's so high. So that's kind of the reason why I went into it, because I loved the idea of travel and food and the connection between the two, and the fact you could take people, like, in Cornwall, you could take people to a cafe in Bondi, or you could take them to a street market in Singapore or whatever. That's just really that's what I was really interested in.
Well, I want to take a deep dive into sort of all of that in a little bit, but tell us about your role at the moment. It sounds like quite a big role. There are a lot of restaurants and a lot of moving parts. What's your day to day like?
Yeah, so we got 700 employees in the UK. Yeah, and so about 120 of them are chefs. So it's kind of like when it's running really smoothly, it's kind of a well-oiled machine. I think one of the things that what people like to assume in the restaurant industry is it's a lot of shouting and stuff like that, which is, it's marketable. I understand why people make careers out of that kind of stuff, and it's all good. But for us, we've always run our restaurants, because my mum's such an integral part of the business. She doesn't like that kind of side of the business. And I think Europe and the UK especially have been a lot slower in kind of moving from a kind of sort of, I'm not going to say French in a bad way here, like it, but in that kind of like military kind of French restaurant kitchen. So my day to day is to make sure the chefs are happy, make sure that what Rick wants in terms of menus is being delivered, and then it's really mostly supplier stuff. Visiting suppliers. It's kind of when things go bad, really bad. It's like I have to go in obviously and figure out what's going on, but it's very rare these days. We're kind of we've taken a lot of the stresses out of the kitchen by being much more organized. So yeah, I mean, give the chefs a beer on Saturday and give them a hug and say you're great, and they're pretty happy most of the time. And I do like to cook though. I don't like, I don't as much do like a whole day anymore where I'm like in the morning prepping. Like sometimes I'll just drop in and do some prep because I enjoy it, like especially fish filleting and stuff because I just like to keep my skills up. But sometimes I'll just jump in on the main section at seafood, which is our main restaurant, our like flagship, and just do a service and just probably take the whole kitchen down. And but I just I kind of get a lot of office work, which is what you have to do when you've got that many people. So yeah, I like to keep it interesting.
I want
Take the kitchen down.
Yeah,
put them in the weeds.
Tell us a little bit about, from a supplier perspective, seafood is so core to a lot of what you do across the restaurants. How do you work it across the restaurants and access the small fishermen and get the fish that you want and deal with seasonality? Is that a big challenge for you?
Oh, it's huge. Yeah, I mean, we have some restaurants over on the East Coast, Bannisters, one in Mollymook, down south of Sydney, and one in Port Stephens. And I remember going over there a few years ago and trying to, I've done a few TV shows over in West Australia, and it's kind of such a big country, and like being able to land stuff off local boats and stuff is something that we take just for granted here. So it's so much easier, and it's got a lot easier in Australia now than it was. A lot of centralized markets, as you well know, like kind of fish moving from where it's caught like hundreds of miles to then go back to where it was caught. Like seemed a bit crazy to me, but for us, we have our local boats in Padstow, and we buy off them and we guarantee them a price for the year. So basically, and the Padstow's on the north coast of Cornwall. So Cornwall's like in the southwest corner, like the little toe of the UK, and the north coast gets pretty rough. Like it does. Like the swell here today is like 30 foot. So there's no boats going out today. Nothing's getting caught. So, but those shellfish, that's mostly lobsters and crabs. So, and for us, that's kind of like a big key component of our menus because it's literally there. And then we'll get sea bass in the summer, line caught. This guy's got the best life. He's a scratch golfer and he goes and catches sea bass. He gets like 20, 30 kilo, 40 kilo at a time. And I've never caught a sea bass in my life. I've tried fishing for them for years. This guy just goes, I'll have to go out with him one day. So that's kind of our local boats, and that's landed right into the back door. And then we distribute them around the restaurant group. So if we have the restaurant in London needs lobsters, we've got lobsters in Padstow, we'll send them up on our we have like a logistics kind of route with our main fish supplier. So Matthew Stevens is our main fish supplier. We've been with for 25 years, family-owned business down in St Ives. So it's one of the bigger fishing ports down in the west of the county. But he can then access both coasts. So if it's rough on the north coast, the south coast will be the south coast of Cornwall. Basically, is the English Channel, so it doesn't get the waves. So. And we have 35 day boats fishing for us. That's just, and then we get some stuff off trawlers as well. Honestly, it's a full-time job. Like fish sustainability and like fish seasons. I could probably bore you for an hour and a half about it, and it's I mean, it's incredible. And especially what with leaving the EU, that whole thing's been a bit of a nightmare, like to be perfectly honest. And the fishermen have been kind of shafted, really, to a big degree. And it's a strange one because it's such an evocative thing. And I think it's because we're an island nation. We have this I think a lot of I'm not going to get too political, but a lot of the Brexit voting people had this idea of Britain being like kind of, I don't know what, like an empire or something. Can I swear? Do you mind me swearing? Yeah, some shit. I have no idea what they thought, but like we were better back in the day, which is obviously nonsense. And somehow the idea of fishing became politicized. So basically, Europe was prepared to give us a really, really good deal, or if they could just have some of our fish, which seems bizarre. But the French, the Spanish markets they're massive for our fishermen, and they cut them off. And there was one guy in Newland, which is the biggest fishing port in the Cornwall in the southwest. We would get most of our fish from, and he was like in his 70s, and he was like going, he was just kept going on the radio going, guys, like I remember like what it was like before we joined the EEC, like in the 70s. Like I remember how hard it was to export, and they were like, now you know what you're waiting. It's like, no, it's really difficult. Like you got to fill in all these forms. It's a nightmare. And then the moment we left, the fishermen were like, this is a nightmare. We can't sell anything. And we're like, yeah, this guy's literally been saying for like months, and nobody's listened to him because everyone wanted, I don't know, sovereignty or some shit. I have no idea, but it hasn't worked basically, and it's been a nightmare. So that's kind of like the fish stuff is, I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, the different seasons, like we like the bluefin tuna we're getting now, which is a really interesting story because, obviously bluefin tuna was the most unsustainable fish in the world. Like there was a big doco on it, and it's became the poster child for like bad fishing practices, right? And for whatever reason, that we suddenly getting loads of them. Like for the last 5 years, my older brother said to me 5 years ago, I've seen bluefin tuna off the Trevose Head, which is a headland near where we grew up. I said, Ed, you're off your head. There's no chance you've seen them. There's no bluefin tuna around here. Anyway, the next couple of years, fishermen are seeing them. They're seeing them. And imagine you're a fisherman, you see like $5,000 just swim past you. Like you cannot catch it, but they're allowed to catch them in Spain, parts of the Med. And then last year, or the year before, sorry, now 23, they said, right, you can take 400 fish, line caught only, and there's a catch and release fishery for recreational fishing, right? My brother has gone out on a recreational fishing boat, and they caught 8 bluefin tuna up to like 300 kilos in like a few hours, and then we took one in, and it was this thing was massive, right? It was like line caught. So and my mate was like one of the chefs that I know you had Dan Gedge on from Lewin, so he would have worked with this guy back in the day, Dan. Another Dan. Dan's like, can I fillet it? I'm like, mate, help yourself. You know what I mean? And he's like, and he started filling it out. I left him to it, and he messaged me, and he's like, it's such an honor. Thank you so much for letting me fillet this fish. It's like, honestly, like for as a fish filleter, this is all I've ever wanted to do. Like, obviously, he's seen the guys in Skiji Market doing it, blah blah blah. Anyway, 2 days later, I've gone back in the restaurant, and he's still covered in bits of tuna, and he's like, I never want to see a fucking tuna again in my life. But it's a really interesting one in terms of like fishery policy. Like you can rest species. Like we've done it with sea bass before. We've done it with cod. We've done it with mackerel even. You rest species, and the stocks do come back. And sustainability is a huge part of my job, but it's also about sustainability of the fishing people themselves. The fishermen, their families, their communities. You want to give them the best price you can because they're risking their lives to give you the product that you're just putting a bit of sauce on it, put it on a plate. It's not you. So you have to. So it's not just about saying you can't ever catch that fish ever again. Rest the species for a bit, let the population come back, listen to the science, and then go and give the fishermen the right price for it. Because then, the fishing communities, like you say, you see a bluefin tuna, $5,000 just swim past you. If you saw $5,000 in cash just walk past you, and you were not allowed to touch you, you'd be like, come on, so it's been really successful. Like the bluefin tuna fishery is now like the quota's gone up a tiny bit, but it's still pretty small. It's still 500 fish, I think. So it's not massive, but from going from where we were 5 years ago, where I didn't believe they existed, to now I've seen them. Two weeks ago, I saw them down at the same place my brother saw them. They're the biggest bait ball I've ever seen in my life, and I've never seen a bait ball in the UK. Like you get in Australia, you get in I go to Indonesia a lot. You're in the Mentawai, you see all the seagulls and that, and you're like, there's fish there, you go and catch them. And this thing was huge. I mean, it was like the size, the whole length of the beach, and it was there for 2 days. 2 days. I went down there day one, it was there. Day two, it was there, and then the humpback whale turned up. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? Never had humpback whales before, but again, climate change doesn't exist, so it's fine. That's what
You
American guy told me on TikTok.
well, speaking of social media, you put a wonderful video on social media just recently with your dad asking him his top 10 fish, which is also a little bit cruel, but it was a
He
pleasure to watch.
totally cooked that. He was so bad. You know what? The thing about the old man is, I love him. He's so funny. But sometimes you just be like, we were on a game show. I don't know if you have it on Australia called Pointless. Have you seen this game show? Yeah. So we went on Pointless, right? And I said, if you just watch a couple of episodes before we get on it, because you need to understand how the game runs. We get there, and I was like, have you watched any episodes? Like, no. I was like, well, so we went out in the first round, got beaten by like Jay Rayner and like Brian Turner and all these other chefs. So I said to him, like, Dad, it's top 10 before we went on, top 10 fish species, but you don't know what's next. And all it is him just saying he loves every species of fish. Because he goes 5-1 full up, and then he's like, and then turbot comes up, which is his favorite, and he was just absolutely cooked. So it was it was funny because we were talking. Social media is such an interesting medium, right? In terms of trying to target different species. I'm still talking about fish. Target different audiences for your restaurant. Because you want to have the young 20 to 45-year-olds. You want to have all the different kind of like pieces of the puzzle. And we were doing this. We're talking about it, and like in a board meeting or something. And I do a show called Cooking with the Stars where you teach a celebrity how to cook. So it's not like MasterChef. It's not serious. It's just lighthearted, but it's really good fun. And it's Marks and Spencers, which is a big supermarket over here. They sponsor it, right? And the guy who got the show commissioned was their head of food and is now the CEO of the whole of Marks and Spencers, right? And they've done this really clever social media campaign where they've got two people from Made in Chelsea and The Only Way is Essex. I don't know if you know those shows. They're kind of faked reality kind of shows, yeah, and so they're very, very famous. One's called Mark, one's called Spencer. So they did Marks and Spencer, and it's really, really funny. But it's not what you'd imagine. Marks and Spencer's traditionally is quite an old company, like where your grand would shop, this kind of stuff. But they revitalized their food program with this show, The Cooking with the Stars, and then they've revitalized their social media thing. And we were watching it in our board meeting. We're like, because we're talking about how we can attract younger people, and like, would we ever do something like this? And we watched it. It was really funny. And then we were like, oh, it'd be really, really interesting to find out, to know, like, did Marks and Spencer's have a problem with this when they were, kind of duking it out whether they would do this? And I was like, oh, it's funny you should say that, actually, because the premiere of my show tomorrow is in Leicester Square, and the CEO of Marks and Spencer's will be there, so I can ask him. So I went in and I asked him. I said, did you guys ever think this wouldn't work for your brand? And he was just like, nah. He's like, why? I said, why? He goes, well, because our usual customers aren't watching TikTok. Us, the people that we think as our standard customers aren't watching TikTok. But also in the industries now, people are too scared to do stuff, right? And I don't mean this. This is what he said. People are scared that they're scared to fail, right? Whereas social media is a place where you can fail. You can put something up, and that top 10 thing with Rick could have just been a complete dud. But the thing is, it's only there for 5 seconds. It's not like a billboard that sits there for ages. So you have to be prepared to do stuff that's a bit out of your comfort zone and try things and see what works. So that one, for me, that video was very funny. And I mean, it's just typical dad. I mean, it's just basically a guy who loves seafood ranking every piece of seafood as number one, apart from monkeyfish. But yeah, it was good fun.
Well, just on that, is there a fish or two that's from the waters near you that you just love when it's in season?
Yeah, like I think I'm not going to say this because I'm a terrible fisherman, but mackerel very easy to catch. You're guaranteed to catch. I got a funny story actually. Can I tell a story? It's a funny one. Right, so I do a thing called Catch and Cook. It's like a 2-day course. So the day one we go out on a boat, we catch a load of fish. We go out onto the wrecks, catch some pollock, which is like a cod family. It's very easy to catch. You might catch a load of ling and cod and stuff out there. Then you catch some mackerel on the way back in, because the mackerel basically throw themselves at you. They're just, complete, they're so easy to catch. The second day we go up to the farm that produces a lot of our vegetables, and we go up there and we do a barbecue course with like big green egg barbecues and like, so it's a 2-day course, right? And that is called catch and cook or something like that. We get to day one. So they're going to the cookery school. There's 16 people, 2 boats, and I'm like, right, we're going to go down to the boat. And I was like giving them a briefing about the boat, who's like, etc., etc. We walk down, walk down to the boats, get on the boat. And one of the ladies, she's on her own. She's like videoing as we're going out of the harbour. There's a nice golf course, an Enadot golf course there. She's filming all this kind of content on her phone. And we get out, start fishing, and we're probably an hour out of Padstow, probably. Something like that. Anyway, the boat skipper is a good friend of mine, and he's like, "Here, Jack." I said, "What?" He goes, "One of your clients is not very happy." I said, "Why not?" She's on the phone to her husband saying she wants her money back. I went round and I said, "Oh, are you okay?" And she's like, "No, I'm not okay." And I was like, "Oh, okay. What's the matter?" She goes, "I hate boats." I said, "Oh, okay, all right." She goes, "My husband bought me this, and I didn't realise we're going on a boat." I said, "Okay, fine." And the thing is, right, you all the questions that will come up later will come up, but at that point, when you're in hospitality and somebody's really struggling or really hates you, that you just go into like a different mode of over the top hospitality, right? It's what everyone will say when something's really tough. You just turn it up. You don't turn around and turn to piss off. So I'm on the phone to the harbour master, right? He's a friend of mine, but to get the harbour master to come out and pick a client up off a boat that far off is a pretty big ask. So I'm on the phone, Bryn. I said, Bryn, like I've got a lady here. She's really not happy. Would you get your rib and just bust out here? And he said, yeah, cool. I said, right, I'll talk to her. So I talked to her. I said, right, we can get a rib to pick you up in 15 minutes. It's like, it's quick, and you can be back. She goes, no, I don't want everyone to not have a good time. I said, okay, fine. So she sits down. She said, I'm in the sun. She goes, I'm fine. Okay, fine, no problem. She sits down. 10 minutes later, Gav comes back. Here, Jack, she's on the phone again. She's really not happy. So I said, listen, wait a minute. I said, are you okay? She said, no. She goes, the 2 worst times of my life have been on boats. I said, well, what are they? She goes, one time when I was in the Maldives, and today. And I said, okay, fine, right, let's get you. We'll tell you what, we'll get you off the boat. So we'll steam back in. We'll get some mackerel. Blah, blah, blah. So we steam back in, trawled a bit of mackerel, got her on the thing, and her husband comes up, and her husband clearly was expecting the day to himself. Like you could tell. He comes up, he goes, oh, it just wasn't very clear. I said, okay, no problem. We'll give you a full refund. You don't. Just like you take a like he goes, yeah, it just wasn't very clear. The whole thing wasn't very clear. Okay, I didn't realize that they were going to go on a boat. I said, okay, fine. So he walks off, and as he walks off, the skipper goes to me, at what point didn't she realize she was on a boat? I said, fuck knows. I said, I'd give him a briefing. Said, we're going on a boat. We walked down to the boat. We got on the boat. We steamed out of the harbour. At some point, she must have realized she was on a boat. Do you know what I mean? So. Oh, it's so funny. I just, that's hospitality all over. When you're really in the weeds, or you're really like, when there's nowhere to go, you just turn it up. You just go, you know what? I'm going to be the nicest person. When that person leaves, I'm going to say, what an idiot. Like what? I mean, it's as if you didn't know you were on a boat. You're on a fucking boat. But anyway, to answer the question, mackerel. So mackerel when it's really, really fresh. So the season for mackerel is like sort of May to September. And they come in, and but it's one of those products that is not particularly good after a few days. I mean, I know Josh Nyland. We're actually together on stage at the Fat Duck at the same time, and I know what he does is so inspirational, so incredible, and I'm sure he could figure out a way. But mackerel doesn't last very long. I wouldn't it's not like an aging fish, or it needs to be fresh. But that's my favorite. And then red mullet. Red mullet is. It's so good. I mean, and the flavor of it is just so complex that what it eats, it just is. And you catch them as well when you're mackerel fishing by accident, and it's just like it's like the equivalent of hitting the jackpot when you're fishing for basically a fish that jumps on the hooks, and you can catch about 50 at a time. To then hook a red mullet is amazing. So they're my favorites, and they're both very seasonal. And red mullet's a bit later in the year, but they're brilliant.
You mentioned about turning up hospitality in certain scenarios. We all know the ramifications of COVID and what the last couple of years and the challenges that there have been. Have you changed the way you operate the group in response to sort of the last couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, it was tough. Like, come to COVID was, we're a seasonal business, so we only make money for 5 months of the year. The rest of the year we lose money. So, and our kind of deepest part when we're in our overdraft, and we're like really like the worst time to anything to hit was March, which is when COVID hit, and we were there going, right, we are going bust in 3 weeks. at the moment. But and then when the government furlough scheme came in, that pushed us to sort of mid-August, and we reopened the restaurant in the first week of July. So that whole period was, my mum's always said like she's been through three recessions in her life, in the 50 years, three big recessions. But now she's adding a pandemic to that. So we were really, we didn't know what to do. Nobody did. And it was such a strange time. And I know it's a very difficult time in Australia as well. And I think you guys, in my view, did the right thing. I know my baby mum's part of family is all from Perth. I mean, it was like, I remember there was a guy. I remember your kind of track and trace system. There was a guy in Woolworths who had COVID or something, and then he'd been to like Macca's or whatever, and they'd given a list of places he'd been. If you'd been there at that time, get tested. And her dad was just like, "I was in that Woolies 2 weeks ago," and I'm like, "Charlie, I think you'd be all right." You know what I mean? Like, I don't think this French geezer or whatever wasn't there then. So, but yeah, we were quite lucky. I mean, the people that really struggled were those young independents in the east of London, the kind of Shoreditch area where there's this amazing food scene and everyone just wanted out of the cities. The moment we were allowed to move, Cornwall was just full, like full. Like we were busier than we've ever been. And I remember being there we didn't really have COVID down here, like in Cornwall. It's more rural. Obviously the lockdowns. We're doing food at the hospital and stuff for the doctors. We had loads of stock, so we're just making food for them and giving it to them and that just to get out of the house basically. And they were pretty. It was pretty low. I mean, there was some deaths, but like nothing major. And when we reopened in July, and I remember the restaurant was fully booked. It was fully booked for more fully booked than we've ever been. We did more like in that short period than we've ever done. But I remember the staff being really quite scared to think that like the taps are just opening on all the cities to come to Cornwall, and we hadn't had it. And so I went in the morning for the briefing, and they were worried. But we reopened, and I think what we learned from it, I think that we obviously pivoted to online, which is still going, which is great, like food boxes, and we did a bit of this and the other. But we were lucky, man. Like my friends' restaurants that were in the east of London who just started, that didn't have our reputation and stuff like that, and weren't like based in Cornwall. Like Cornwall was just so packed. I know it happened the same in Bannisters, Mollymook, and that was just really busy. I know a lot of the people I know in Margaret River and stuff that were saying that they were really busy with domestic tourism. So we did really well, and actually it was kind of that kind of masked the impact for us. But obviously menus got smaller. I think that across the board, I think people have just. I mean, one thing I noticed when I eat out in Australia is that you have your menu, not always, because there's some menus like that are huge, but like a lot of the restaurants I go to, the menus are quite small, and quite controlled. But then your like cost of service, your wage costs and stuff is so much more than ours. So I think we've definitely shortened our menus, and we've definitely looked to put in like value stuff. But I think that's it's not just COVID, it's Brexit. I mean, Brexit's, let's be honest, it's been a disaster. I mean, it's 4% of GDP, for the next 20 years. So everybody's. I mean, nobody wants to talk about it because it's kind of people just. We got to move past it, but you can't ignore. When you're trying to grow an economy and you're trying to grow a sector, hospitality is such an important sector to the exchequer, for the taxes we pay, and we really just got kind of like screwed basically, because I think people think in this country that all our food is growing, like basically the old man's fault. Like, he goes around England going, here's some tomatoes being grown, and everyone thinks all our tomatoes come from Wiltshire, but they don't. France and Spain produce most of our fruit and veg, because if you look at a country like Australia, I mean, you wouldn't bat an eyelid about getting fruit and veg, your mangoes from Queensland, whatever. It's but the Brits just, I don't know. I think somebody needs to do a show showing what a farm in February looks like in this country, because there's literally our local farmers, like there's a bit of kale and cabbage, and that's about it. So the COVID thing, I mean, it was again, but we were lucky. Like I say, if we had been anywhere else than Cornwall, I don't know how we would have survived. I really don't.
At the top of the show, you detailed sort of the love of food and the travel that your family did, which sort of sucked you into the industry as a career. But you did psychology, you did your masters in ancient history. Were you always destined, do you think, for hospitality, or did you try and sort of put it to a side and go in another direction?
Well, so I think so when I was working, so I was working in the kitchen from about 12 as a kitchen porter, and it's a well trodden path. But I actually then went out to the front of house, and so when I was going through my schooling, I was in front of house because I thought to myself, if I'm going to go into the kitchen, I'm going to do it after university because I want to be able to. I don't just want to be a seasonal chef. I'd rather go in, see if I like it, and then if I like it, stick with it. If I don't, I knew I wanted to be in hospitality because it's so important to our family. But my dad and mum said go to university. Dad had been to Oxford. He got like a third class degree, which is like the lowest degree because he just dossed around, but he still wins at Oxford. And we were quite and it sounds like upper sales, but there is quite a few we have quite a few doctors and stuff in the family that have all been to university. So we're kind of like, the dad had said go to university, so I'd go on there to do a psychology degree, and it was funny. I actually decided to do it I was at Manly Corso, so I did like a gap year, and I was just in Sydney or in Northern Beaches, and I met somebody from my school, and I thought, oh wait, you're going to uni? I was like, oh yeah, could do. And then she was pretty hot, so I was like, yeah, I'll come to Cardiff. So I went to Cardiff. I ended up dating her for about 8 years actually, as it goes. But and then when I was at uni, my dad kept saying like, don't go into hospitality, do something different. So he got me a work experience at a Willis, which used to be, it's been bought out now, but it basically an aviation insurance broker in the city of London, right? Proper full on, city life, right? So I did like 4 weeks there, and I was doing like, and this was, I can tell you the dates because it's very, very rememberable date. So it was the end of August and the beginning of September 2001, right? So I was there during 9/11, and they brokered, I think, American Airlines. Again, it's all super complicated, but it was such a hectic day. Like, as you can imagine, it was just tragic, and like they all had people, and like, so the whole thing was just like completely an insane day. And I remember just sitting there, and the next day going in, and they're all like working, like they worked all night, and they're all like just working 100 miles an hour. And I was like, do you think I should probably just like maybe quit my work experience a bit early? You guys seem pretty busy. And like, there's not, what can I add to it? They sent me to the pub to watch it. That's what no word of a lie. Guy gave me 250 quid notes to go down the pub and tell us what's happening. And I'm like, you guys know what's happening. I mean, this was 2001 before you had all the phone trackers, but they knew what was going on. They knew what airplanes were involved, etc., etc. So anyway, they offered me a job, and then the chairman, we were down in Cornwall, and he has a house down here, and we were at the cookery school for an event, and he said, listen, if I were you, I'd stay down here and build this business because my workers, like, it may seem like fun, but they are burnt out. They'll burn out by the time they're 40, and they'll make a lot of money, and they'll want to retire down here to Cornwall. And actually, it's funny. I actually know somebody who works for the same company in its new guys, and he's actually just bought a house down here, and he's my age, and he's definitely burnt out. Like, he's had and the city lifestyle just. And I just remember thinking to myself, I could do something different, but I could just go and start as a commie, work my way up. So I got to the restaurant after I finished my masters, and again, I did a master's degree because I love daytime television and bowling. It was like ancient Celtic history. I mean, my dissertation was so weird that even my professor said, I don't think there's anybody like in kind of academia that can really tell whether or not your theory is right or wrong, because no one's ever studied like the importance of the tin mining industry to pre-Roman Cornwall. It's just nonsense. So anyway, so after that, I loved my time at uni. I really did. And to be honest, the one thing I did notice during uni time was that I could cook. Like, I knew it was strange. Like, just little things that I was doing that no other students did. Bear in mind, I ate my fair share of like kebabs. Like, don't get me wrong, but I was quite shocked at how little the guys knew how to cook, and my friends, like it was just, and I know I never really thought I could cook. I just knew what good food tasted like, and through osmosis, I suppose, taken a lot of it in. So I started, I started to sort of do a lot of my own kind of bits and bobs like mayonnaises and stocks and stuff when I was at, in uni, um, and then I came out and I was like, right, I'm just going to go in. I'm going to go in there on the first day and I'm just going to sit myself down. So my head chef, Stefan, who was a French chef, he just left us. He was with us 20 years. He put me on a section, and I was with this Swiss guy called Dominic, who I'm still friends with. And he was just come out of the army, done like his, year military service or whatever. And he nailed me. He had no idea who I was. Like Steph didn't say this is, Rick's son or anything like that. So for about 2 weeks, he properly beasted me. Not like hard, but just stuff to this day I do instinctively whenever I start set up in a kitchen. Like just the way you organize yourself. My personal life is the most chaotic place that you've ever been. But in work, I am really organized. And that's the reason I think that I really enjoy cooking, is because it forces me to do something that's not natural to me, but it actually makes me feel good. But it's weird that it doesn't translate. Like, look at my car. My car is not as organized as my section at the restaurant. My car is like literally like a bomb's hit it. But this guy,
you've got young kids as well, so that's fair.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think the young kids need 3 surfboards and 2 pairs sets of golf clubs in the car. But anyway, yeah. So he absolutely nailed me. I enjoyed it. Like he was, like little things like, like when you're prepping something, like, you say you're doing tomato concasse, where you take the seeds out and cut it in little squares, right? So you do one tomato and then you turn it into petals, and then you do all the tomatoes in petals in a big sheet, and then you do all of it into julienne, and then all of it into strips, and all of it into concasse. I was sitting there with one tomato and doing the same thing once, and he was just like, why are you doing that? It's a waste. You do all of it, so you get better at every single stage. And then things like organizing, like how your chopping board goes down, where you've got your hot water, soapy water, where your antibac spray, your little bin, all that kind of stuff. And anyway, he nailed me for a couple of weeks, but I kind of enjoyed it. Anyway, then Dad came in. And he came to the pass, and he was like, "All right, how's it going?" He's like, "What shift do you work?" Whatever. I said, "I'm on early, so I finish at 4." He goes, "Oh, do you want to go for a pint?" I was like, "Yeah, go for a pint." Like that, and I went back to my section. Dominic looked at me like, "How do you know him?" And I was like, "Oh, he's my dad." And then he was just like, the next morning I came in, and this geezer had gone home and he baked me like a strudel, like some sort of Swiss cake, and there was a cake on my section. I was like, Dominic, you don't need to do that, mate. It's fine. I've enjoyed this life. I mean, I'd like to have done it for longer. So, but yeah, I just and I was hooked. Like I was hooked. Yeah, he baked me. It's like it's random strudel, and like, do you want to come around for a fondue? I'm like, well, I love a fondue. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, I'll come around for a fondue. But and then I just loved it. We had a really good group of chefs in there at the time. Like Dan Gedge was there, and then James Knappett, who's got 2 stars at the kitchen table in London. Nathan Outlaw was there. I mean, that was just before I started in the kitchen, but when I was front of house, Nathan Outlaw was there, who's had 2 stars. There was a whole bunch of of really, really talented chefs. John Walton, who's now at Paul Ainsworth's as his sort of exec chef. And it was just a fun time. This guy called Ben, who'd been at the Manoir, and he taught me a lot of stuff. And he was like one of those blokes. It's like he was just like annoying, like he was so good looking. He was going out with Sting's daughter, fucking, do you know what I mean? So she came down. We took her out on our boat. With Dad bought a boat, which is stupid because we're terrible with boats, and we took her out on that. We didn't go anywhere. We couldn't get it off the mooring. It's like a yacht boat. Terrible boat, and she just sat on the front, and we didn't go anywhere for 4 hours. Just sat on the mooring, and she was like, "Oh, it's a really good day. Had a great time." I was like, "Yeah, probably because we didn't go anywhere." And but anyway, he's now got a restaurant in Charleston, over in the east coast of America. But he went out to work for Gordon Ramsay when he opened in London in New York. But he was like an annoying. He used to teach me stuff, and he'd be like, "I know you're gonna hate me for this, but you'll never forget this." Like, you'd be your first day. I remember my first night cooking mains with, I think may have been with Dan Gedge. Can't remember, but anyway, Dominic was there. I remember Swiss Dom was there so I was cooking mains, And my mate, I said, I want to cook mains. Like, he's like, do it on a Saturday night when you're really busy. I'm like, nah, I'll do it on like a Tuesday. You just don't do it on a Tuesday. Do it on a Saturday when you're really busy. Because when you've done it, you've done it. You know, you boxed it off. If you do 60 on a Tuesday or 180 on a Saturday, 60 you could have done it, but you're not going to have really done it. So anyway, I went in there Saturday, and I was absolutely cooking like I've never cooked before. And it has to be said, I was not. I was concentrating on the food. I wasn't concentrating on like the amount of herbs that were around my feet. And just as I got past through the first like chunk of checks, I remember just going to myself, right, clean down. And literally, just as that thought entered my head, Ben came over, this guy, and he beasted me. He was like, this air is fucking disgusting. Like, your herbs on the fire. And I'm like, literally, I was just about to like, we call it ranger. I don't know what it means to arrange, but ranger just means like clean section. And I was just about to ranger the whole section. And he just got me. And I was just like, you bastard. But this guy was, he just rode the Atlantic just recently. I love him. But we took him down to the local rugby club, the Camels, and he had been to like Marlborough College, which is like a big private school, and he was a scrum half. And we went down to the rugby club, and they're like, oh, he just wanted to run around like that. And literally, he was by far and away the best player on the pitch from both sides. Like, everyone was just like, don't bring that guy back again. He's too good. But yeah, so that's kind of how I started, and then I was just hooked, man. Like, I just loved it. Like an office 9 to 5, I just am not suited to it. I just get, I hate that. Like, when you look at the clock and you're like, what? It's 2. I thought it was like 5. I thought I was going home, and whereas in the kitchen, you've never got enough time. Like, 11 o'clock set up, 12, you're always chasing yourself. And I just love the fact that I love the camaraderie. I love the people. I love the fact that you get all sorts of like different, and the thing that my dad hadn't realized, which I had realized, and I think the thing that really changed it for me was that um, when he was doing it sort of solo, not solo, but like there wasn't a lot of great restaurants in the UK in the 70s and the 80s. Yeah, no, the 90s come along, you've got like Marco, Gordon, it starts to like really kind of kick on. And then the 2000s, when I was sort of like finishing uni and coming into the kitchen, you've got like Heston, and for me, like that gives you a path into cooking that's not like I've been trained since I was 16. Like I'm an army grunt. It's like that. It's you can read around your subject. There's a book called I'm sure Howard McGee's book on food and cooking, which is the chemistry of food. And then like I bought that and I just read it and just was like, this is so interesting. Not because it must have been fucking annoying to have like a 24-year-old kid going, you can't seal meat, you can only sear it because of Maillard reactions. But we did have like at the time we had like a guy that used to be a lawyer. We had like Paul, who was our head chef over at Bannisters. He had come from uni. Like we'd attracted in people from different sort of disciplines, if you know what I mean. And I think that's been my phone's just fallen over. Sorry. I think that's been really important, like for me, because I could be a bit geeky about my subject. You get that a lot now, especially with things like wine and cocktails and all that sort of stuff. You get like real proper like geeks, and Heston did that to me, and we're very close with that group. We've had the last exec chef was started at work with me on the same day. First day he started as an apprentice with us, and a couple of their chefs at dinner have come through our kitchens, and and I went to stage there in their kind of lab when Josh was there, Nyland was there. So, and I just love all that. I mean, I'm not, I love the food there. I think for an experience of a meal, the Fat Duck is one of the most fun experiences you have, because it just goes. I mean, pound for pound, it's just good. It's good value. Like, I'm not saying it's great value. It's not cheap, but you're there for like 5 hours, and the way that they've done the storytelling thing now is great. And I just love that like concept of being like if it, like they will say all the time, if it makes it better, we'll do it. Like it could be the most, some of the kit they've got in their kitchen, some of the kind of lab kit, it's just nowadays this was back when I was there, it was 2010, 12, something like that. Nowadays, a lot of restaurants have the kit, but some of the stuff that they were trying out in the lab was just insane. Like just like medical, CVAPs and, kind of, I don't even know, pressurized, dehomogenized, or I don't know, who knows. But I felt really happy when I was on stage there. And obviously Josh was there, which is great. and his partner was at the waterside and she came over, Julie, and yeah, it was a good time. And then I got into a kind of I got you know I got into a kind of period of just being quite into like all the kind of Scando stuff, and I was going over to the Mad Summit every year, and hanging out with kind of a load of like Scandinavian cool dudes, and and then I suppose I get to a point where I just started to like the simple things in life. I think a lot of chefs do, to be honest. And I remember when we went to I remember Neil Perry. We were going down to we were in Spain doing a recce for one of Dad's shows, 2007, I think, and he was like, "Do you want to come along?" Because had a few contacts down in San Sebastian, and blah blah blah. And he was like, "Oh, we should go to this restaurant called Neil Perry's." Like, send me this message saying we should go to this restaurant, Eshta Barry, and I'd never heard of it. We went down there, and I can see why chefs love that restaurant, because it's simple and it's just honest, and it's like, yeah, it's a tasting menu, and yeah, it's impossible to get a table now, and it's in the top 5 in the world and all that, but for all the right reasons for me. Like that's like a chef's kind of restaurant. And I think chefs do like simple things. I really do. I just think when it's done well, I just think that but then when you've got a spiel, you've got a shtick that you have. If you're a Michelin, you're 2 Michelin, you're 3 Michelin, you've got to keep that going, because that is what you do. I remember when Nathan, a few people have handed back their stars. I did a stage down to Michel Brass, and Sebastian was taking over the restaurant, and he handed back his stars a few years later. And I know Nathan changed his restaurant during COVID to become more simple and move away from Michelin. And that's not to say there's anything wrong with Michelin. I love Michelin, but I didn't eat in a Michelin restaurant until I was 27. That trip to Spain, and we went to Arzac. We had a 3 Michelin star restaurant with the old man. That was the first Michelin restaurant I had eaten in with Dad. I'd eaten in them on my own. Obviously, I've been to all of them, but a lot of them in the UK and whatnot. But Dad he's very like simple stuff, and I think that's kind of where I've got to in my kind of journey. I just maybe it's because I'm getting lazy. I don't know, but when I was at Michel Brass, I remember thinking, this is that was a place I wanted to go more than anywhere. And then, again, people often say, having a dad like yours, is it bad? Is it good? It got me in there. Like, it got me a star share, which is not easy, and I loved it. But I was like, this is crazy. Like, the level of detail, the like almost obsessive compulsive nature of it is just so beyond where I think I could ever get to, that it's kind of not worth it. It's like it's like going surfing. Like, I'm a pretty good surfer. Like, I'll surf a lot of places, but it'd be like going out at Lake Chopu in Tahiti and being like, I've bitten off a bit more I can chew here. This is not me. Like, I'm paddling into the channel, basically on the way to Fiji. So yeah.
When you detailed sort of your current role at the moment, you mentioned there's an element of it where it's sort of what Rick wants from the restaurants. Do you have any stories of what it's like working with your dad and how that works across the restaurant?
Yeah, it's quite funny, actually. So there's 2 offices. My mum's office, which she does the interiors, all the rooms, all that kind of stuff, and my brother and his wife work in there. And that's like the Google office. It's like there's dogs and cats and kids kicking around, and it's like Dad's office is like, there's a big black chair and he sits in it, and it's like, I always say, like, if Chalky the dog was still alive, he'd be stroking him like a Bond villain. The thing is about the old man is he's very open to anything you want to throw at him, but he's also like, through 50 years of trial and error and basically seeing everything the hospitality has, from just running restaurants to eating in restaurants to going around the world traveling food. He loves honesty in food. He loves that kind of feeling, and that's the reason we didn't eat in any Michelin restaurants growing up, is because he wanted to get to meet people and to talk to people and to find out what makes them tick. So you want to put any dish on, he'll gladly like taste it and give you feedback. But the thing with chefs is, he and me to a certain extent, when I was younger, when I was going through that phase of staging, when I was staging at Tetsuya's and at Michel Brass, and that I was kind of like, can I do this kind of sort of food? And the thing is that young chefs, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Amadeus about Mozart, but there's a line that too many notes in it. Basically what that means is, you want to get something on the plate with as little kind of fuss as possible that really works, right? So you have to hit all those kind of bits that you want to hit in terms of, nowadays it might be temperature, textures, these sorts of things. For Dad, it's about honesty and about going, is that the kind of food that I would like to eat myself and serve to my family and stuff like that. So he's very clear when if you want, if you're a young chef and you want to get any advice from somebody that's been through a lot, you do a lot worse than speak to the old man, because he will tell you exactly what the way that he thinks food should be. And it's not to everyone's taste. We're very simple. You get people coming down and saying food's too simple, and you're like, yeah, great, nice one. It's okay, cool. What do we say? What do we do with that? Like Dad's like tagline is fresh fish, simply cooked. That's all he says, and that it's like you're stood next to a harbour. That piece of sea bass was landed 4 hours ago, and and you're saying we're too simple. Yeah, fine, but that's what we do. So, and I think it's so working with him is about making sure that message gets around to all the chefs. And it's not much. It's like taste your food. Things. Like make sure you've got. Like he'll say seasoning and probing. Like, that's all he wants. Probe your fish. With a thermometer. Get it to the right temperature and make sure it's seasoned. Like that's because you're doing simple food. You can't fucking those things up. If you haven't seasoned it and it's overcooked, you're cooked. You've not got anywhere to hide. So that's what working with him is basically that. And what's really good is when he'll go to a restaurant, often in Australia or Asia or wherever when he's traveling, and he'll be on. When he's really excited, he doesn't. Two things about him. One, he pocket dials me all the time. Like I reckon, and honestly, I reckon about 10 times a month I'll hear him walking and like this blurred conversation. And every time I'm like, Dad, imagining that he could hear me like a tiny voice in his pocket. And to this day, I said to him, I said, Dad, I don't understand how you do it. If my name was Aaron, I'd understand because I'd be right at the beginning of the fucking alphabet. But anyway, and he was like, oh, I'm trying to change. I'm like, yeah, like to be honest, I said, don't change it, Dad. I actually quite enjoy it. Like it does make me feel connected. But then sometimes he'll phone me. He'll pocket dial me in the middle of the pissing night. Sometimes it's a bit annoying. But when he's really excited, he'll phone me up and he'll be like, I've just had this, and it's and that's when you really you want to get that thing on the menu, whatever it is going to be. I've just had this. I've just had this. How can we make it work? And that's like really exciting. And the chefs get really really turned on by it as well, because he'll come into the kitchen really kind of on one, like really, I've got this, got this great recipe or great way of using this different species, or even at the moment he's just we're looking at our 50th menu, and he's been an 8 at the Sportsman, which is a pub in Whitstable in Kent, 1 star, and he's taken a load of like inspiration from the menu there, and so it's he's good as gold. He wants things done the right way, but he's not a shouty chef. Like he doesn't get super angry. And he's probably had a go at me twice in my career where he's really had a crack at me, and they've both been well justified. The thing is, I mean, yeah. So he's good. He's just like he is on TV. To be honest, he's pretty cuddly. He's like, but he's just got that personality does filter through the kitchens, and that's why I think our kitchens just aren't shouty places. That him and Mum both have always just been like, they've always run the business as it's just the two of them. They wait for each other to make a decision. They're not, there's not one kind of like person that dominates the other. They're very egalitarian, if that's the right word.
You've done a stack of TV shows, and you've written books, and you got this crazy huge role with 700 staff. Like, what have you got planned for the next sort of year or two?
Yeah, well, at the moment, so I mean, we're doing. I mean, it's obviously that TV stuff is really difficult at the moment. I got a couple of shows on SBS in WA, so I did 2 seasons of a show over there, and then I did another show which was commissioned by Foxtel, which was taking British food around the world, and most of the times they fucking hated it. But it was like trying to sell like jellied eels to Spanish people. Do you know what I mean? And it wasn't selling it either. It was like I still think it's the idea came right. So I was in Augusta, down WA, and I was thinking to myself, this is a great Thai restaurant. Like I worked for David Thompson at Nam, in Bangkok. 2 guys. one guy from Devon, one guy from Wales, right? And they came back from Nam. They opened a place called Somsa in East London. If you're in London, it's unbelievably good Thai food. I mean, very like kind of long chim kind of vibes, but like and 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 I was thinking to myself, like these English guys have gone out to Bangkok and they've worked for David and like been like they're obsessed with that kind of food, and they've come back, and one guy is actually half Thai as well, but they both come back and they're making this the best Thai food in London, and but they're using British ingredients, like the meat and the fish and stuff. And I just remember thinking, imagine if you went to Bangkok and you're walking down the road and there's a guy or girl, whatever, who'd gone to like Whitby and worked in a fish and chip restaurant, like the best fish and chip restaurant in Whitby, and then which is up in the north, right? And they come back to Bangkok and was doing like Bangkok style with Bangkok ingredients, but fish and chips, because they worked for the best fish and chip restaurant in England. It'd be so funny. So I thought, well, why don't we just do a show? And I pitched it to Matt. He's from Sydney. And I said, look, we'd go and we'll get a food historian, we'll learn about the history of the dish, and then we'll take it to like crazy places. So we went to like potted shrimps in Darwin. We did like steak and kidney pudding in Singapore. We had this Singapore one was wild. Like we were running and gunning this show like pretty. It was like pretty. We didn't. I mean, not saying we didn't get permits, but like we did have permits. But the one in Singapore, you know what Singapore's like, right? So we set up this little box kitchen, like it's called Inside the Box, right? And we were giving away the food for nothing. So I was working with a local chef in Singapore. We'd done the history of it in the show with this lady Polly Russell, who like does all Heston's history for all of his dishes. We'd go on and eat in a steak and kidney pie with Callum Franklin, who's this amazing pie guy in London. You've probably seen his work on Instagram. And anyway, we're in Singapore. We're making this dish, and we're going to give it away. And we're in the financial sector, like Marina Bay, but the Twin Towers, they're called, the financial sector. And one of the guys, the director he's like a hipster Bondi guy. Like he knew the guy that ran the buildings. Like I don't know how he knew him, but a family friend or whatever. So this geezer's gone, help yourself, do whatever you want, So we just set up, and suddenly people turn up with like guns and stuff, and they're like, what the hell? And we're like, Matt, like, find your mate. Like his mate's playing golf on Sentosa or whatever. Like we can't get through to him, and we're just going, no, honestly, this guy, I can't remember his name. Say he's called Dave. Dave said it's fine. Dave said it's legit. Nobody knows who Dave is because he's so high up. Do you know what I mean? It's like he's so beyond anybody, and we're like, can we just talk to like somebody like senior, because they'll know Dave. Like all the security like don't know Dave, don't know who you're talking about. So anyway, we nearly got shut down for that, but we did make it in the end. So yeah, that was a good show. And I'll tell you the best thing about that Aussie cruise, man, Aussie film cruise. You can do anything with Aussie film cruise because people love Australians. They give you access. We're in Cape Town, and they're like, we got access to these places. And they were like, oh, you would need a permit, but you guys, Australia. And I'm like, yes, good day, mate. But yeah, so that's, and then I do, so those shows were good fun, but those kind of food and TV channel travel shows, it's just hard to get off the ground these days unless you're like, you got a big broadcaster behind you. So that so I do this show, Cooking with the Stars, which is great. It's great fun. I get to meet these. The first 2 years I had like AJ, she's like this presenter, Nigerian model, she's beautiful. And then second year I had one of the old Love Island contestants, Maura Higgins, who's a hilarious Irish lady. And then I had Chris Eubank, which is a bit of a curveball. And then last year I had Catherine Ryan. Chris Eubank he was interesting. He said he had a photographic memory. So what you have to do on the show is basically you have an hour in the studio to cook one dish, and you kind of like, we were doing this Indian kind of themed week for his first week, and I'm like, you've got a photographic memory, like, and I'm not sure you do, but let's just hope you do. And he didn't. He had no. He just went. He was. But when you see somebody, we call it going down in this country, but when you see somebody in the weeds, when they're brain overload, and they like, sometimes I've had it in the kitchen where you look at somebody and they're gone, and they are down and out. Like you'd imagine Chris Eubanks done it to a few people in the past. He was gone. He had no idea. He was making his curry. He had no clue what he was doing. It just completely tanked. But so that show's coming up. So I'll start filming that in a couple of weeks, and then again. It's the social media stuff. It's you're seeing some of the content creators doing quite well at that. So we've been putting a few videos up, and it's just fun. I mean, there's a lot of content down here in Cornwall that we're capturing this year for the 50th. It's quite a lot of storytelling, and I'm writing a new cookbook. I don't know if I can tell the story. So my cookbook. So I was like, my agent was going like, you've got a we got like a lot of interest in this cookbook. Can you just get your little treatment of it done, whatnot? And I was over in Sri Lanka surfing. I met these Aussie guys, and Sri Lankan kind of like, Sri Lanka's it's a decent, nice place to go. It's a bit like Indo, but like about 10 years ago, surf's quite good, food's okay, and like, I really enjoy going there. It's pretty chilled. And these Aussie guys are going to this nightclub. On this cliff, and I'd never heard of it, so I was like, yeah, sweet. And they had a little Ritalin, right? Okay, and I know, like, it's an ADHD medication, right? And it's not like so they were smashing this Ritalin. I was like, yeah, go on then, whatever. So I have some of that. So I had this Ritalin. Went out for a night, and the next day I had another one. Just I thought I'd have a go. And then I just smashed out my book. Like literally, I must have ADHD. I must do, because I literally sat there on my computer in like a hostel in Sri Lanka and just nailed this book treatment and then sent it off. And my agent's like, this is really, really good. I said, yeah. So I went to meet the publishers, and they're a big publisher in the UK. I went and had a sit down with them. And they're like, oh, it's obviously we're really keen to work with you. And, it's just, we obviously been waiting quite a while for this treatment. We knew it was coming, and it's come. It's really, really good. I was like, yeah, to be honest with you, I had done nothing on it. I went to Sri Lanka, boshed a couple of Ritalin, and then just smashed it out. And then, as we left, my agent just goes to me, "Never tell that story ever again." So I'm sorry, Bora. I have told it one more time. But so yeah, so I'm in the process of writing another book at the moment. So yeah, again, I'm probably gonna need some Ritalin. So yeah, that's kind of where I am at the moment. But to be honest, this year's really, I mean, like, the industry's not in a good spot in the UK. Like, it's really not. And anybody who says they're doing well, like it's weird. Like, even back along when we were having difficult years, like, chefs are always a bit like, oh yeah, everything's fine. It's really tough. The Brexit thing, I think, it's just so hard. It's so hard. Food prices have gone up. Obviously, energy prices have gone up, and our margins are just so slender. And I think the Australian model is, we're getting a lot closer to the kind of what the Bannisters kind of like wage profile and food profile is. And the thing is that it is difficult, but my problem is that I really wish that I really hope that as the wages go up and everything, that the young girls and guys are going to spend that in restaurants. Like, I really do. I know in Australia, you eating out and cafe culture is massively important to you as a country. I just think that, like, in our country at the moment, it feels like that extra money is probably not necessarily going to come to hospitality. I just think that the youngsters, I know it sounds bad. I'm not saying they're all going to the gym and they're not eating out, but they, when you feel old, like, I've never felt old. Like, I'm pretty young at heart. Like, I don't like I say, I'm pretty active. But it was when, like, I heard that the university students were drinking less than our generation did for the first time. University students were going to the gym rather than going on the piss, and I've gone, what the hell is wrong with people? And then I was speaking to my mate Carl, who's got a really cool restaurant in London. If you're ever in London, Chicken Sours, it's like fried chicken and sour cocktails, but just epic. It's so good. And I said, like, Carl, what the hell's going on? And he's like, this is what, because he's got a couple of sites, all their staff are young, kind of. He's like, they're all vegans and they're all going to the gym, like, And I was like, oh God, maybe it's time to change industry. But no, I mean, it's all good. Like, again, we're in a good spot as a business, but it's just the industry is really struggling, and we don't even have like hospitality doesn't even have a minister. Like, even a junior minister would be good, someone to talk to and to, like, kind of throw ideas at and ask for assistance. I don't even know where we sit. Like, we sit in farming or somewhere. I don't know, but it's a bit of a shame. Yeah, it's a bit of a shame. So, yeah, I mean, we've got the 50th year. We've got a lot going on. We're doing that. The old man's DJing at this event. And, oh my God, it's going to be because he used to be a DJ before we opened the restaurant, and so he's doing a night on the deck. So I'm just, it's going to be wild. We got like a load of events. Like, we got the original menu pricing, which went live 2 days ago. I think we had 500,000 people on the site trying to get a ticket for that for like, we had like 1,000 tickets for like £2 for a lobster and like 30p for a prawn cocktail for the original menu prices from 1975. So yeah, it's going to be a fun year. I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, you're doing amazing things, and it's an absolute honour to catch up with you. What do you love about what you do?
You know what? It's really, really simple. It's just you could be in there all day, and you could have had the shittest day, and you're in the weeds, in the shit all day, but then like a waiter comes back and just said, "Oh, table 16 said that's the best piece of fish they've ever eaten." And you just go, "That's it. That's all you need." And it really is as simple as that. It's just it's like you're restoring people's health, and that's where the restaurant term comes from. It's about restoration. You bring them in off the street, you feed them, you water them, you give them something to drink. You give them a good time, you take their money, and then you take them out, and hopefully that you've affected their life in a positive way. And that's it. That really is. And hospitality, when you've got it, when it's part of who you are, you love it. And I can, like I say, people always, "Oh, it must be a nightmare to cook for you." I'm like, nah, you give me anything. You cook anything for me. I don't care. The act of you cooking for me is all I want. I will not ever criticize. If you say this is the best, the best thing you're ever going to eat, and I'm if you start being a prick about it, then obviously I'll be like, yeah, season's way off and the plating's terrible. But you can give me anything, like I love it. I love anything, and I just love those moments you have where you just have just a great meal you didn't expect, or a young kind of a startup company, and like there's a sandwich shop near me, and I'm just like, every time I go in there, it's just like brilliant sub sandwiches, and it's probably a bit too a hipster for Cornwall, but like every time, like on my Instagram, anyone asks about where I should eat in Cornwall, it's there. It's like sharing the love as well, because it is, when you've got a platform, you want to shine a light on people in a positive way, and I don't, food critics are food critics. That's their job, right? I don't think it's right that like a chef becomes a food critic. If you didn't like it, don't say anything. If you like it, say something, and just that's how I go about it. So that's it, really. I just like making people happy, I guess.
Well, you've been bloody entertaining today, that's for sure. Mate, absolute honour to have you on the show today. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
Cheers, mate. Thanks a lot.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.